Good morning, everybody. This is our lecture number 9 of our lecture course. I gave you a week off last week, so we're picking up with number 9, and I'm looking at probably around mid-February, late February at the latest, as to when we can finish up our lectures. Okay, so we are getting there. As always, this lecture will have an assignment sent to you later, and that assignment is due next Saturday, which would be the 16th of January, okay? Today we're going to discuss basic maneuvers in a low-risk environment. That's our topic. And just for the purposes of definition, a maneuver, by our definition, is anytime you change speed or position or both, okay? And during that change in speed and position, you often find yourselves obviously steering your wheel in one direction or another, okay? So there are different types of basic maneuvers that we can discuss, and we're going to start with lane changing. And obviously, lane changing involves steering actions and changes in speed. And, the first thing before we go through some of the steps that you need to consider is the fact that you must signal. You always want to signal in advance when you change lanes. That's extremely important because people can't guess what you're doing, okay? So how do we change lanes safely? The first thing we want to do is look ahead, look to our sides and our rear, and you're looking for a safe gap in traffic. So you're looking all around you. You want to know what's going on all around your car. But obviously you're moving into the right lane or the left lane, so you're especially checking to see that there's a gap, okay? As I mentioned before, you need to signal well in advance. Always check your blind spot. That should be the last thing you do before you move into the lane. Because remember, in the, you want to make sure nobody's creeping up in the interval. That should be the very last thing you do, is double check that blind spot to make sure nobody's creeped into that lane, okay? When the conditions are safe, and you see that gap, you steer yourself into the new lane and you adjust your speed to the flow of the traffic. Sometimes that means speeding up a bit, sometimes that means slowing down. What you don't want is to exceed the speed limit, okay? But you also want to make sure that, assuming everybody's within the speed limit, that you're maintaining your flow of traffic. You don't want to stop or slow down too much that you're risking getting hit from behind if somebody's coming up kind of fast, okay? So you want to, again, go with the flow of traffic. Once you're in your new lane, you want to cancel your turn signal, because more often than not, when you're changing lanes, the recovery of your steering wheel doesn't go as far enough to click off your turn signal. So usually when you change lanes, once you've straightened your lane and you're moving straight in your new lane position, you want to cancel your turn signal, okay? Now, in terms of changing lanes, we also want to consider when you enter traffic from a stop position, when you're pulling away from the curb, okay? And of course, the first rule I would emphasize on that is, of course, you need to yield the right of way to any traffic that is in that lane that's approaching. And I always say, as a general rule, if you give the right of way to any traffic that's half a block away, is generally a good rule of thumb, okay? So if there's a car within half a block of you as you're pulling away from the curb, you wait and give that car the right of way, okay? Remember the time-space method of judging distance. So if, traffic is traveling at faster speeds, then you want to search a greater distance ahead, okay? Because you're going to be coming into the lane at a faster speed as well. And you don't want to end up too close to a car ahead of you in the new lane, or God forbid, hit that car. So again, if the traffic is going fast, you want to make sure that you keep up with that traffic, okay? And again, accelerate smoothly so that you're going with the flow of traffic. Lane changing takes some practice, and more than likely you're not going to do any of that on your road test. They typically don't ask you to change lanes, but of course in reality you're going to have to do that. So you want to practice it, okay? Now, changing lanes could also mean leaving traffic and pulling over to the curb. And of course, yeah, let me just go back to what I said before. Obviously, you will be changing lanes from the stopped curb position into traffic on your road test. That begins your road test. And of course, the end of your road test is changing lanes from the movement of traffic to pull over to the curb. Okay, so obviously those two things are important for your road test. Okay. And when you're pulling over to the curb, the first thing you want to make sure you do is plan well in advance. On your road test, your examiner's not going to hit you with the last second with, okay, pull over to the curb. They're going to give you enough warning so that you have time to signal well in advance and to plan what you're doing, okay? And it's always a good idea when you're pulling over to park at a curb that you tap your brake a few times just to kind of make sure you let the person know behind you that you're slowing down and you're pulling over, as well as, of course, the turn signal, okay? Now, if you're near an intersection, you want to take special care, okay? Because now you're pulling over to the curb and, there's a lot more activity. So if you're parking your car, if you're pulling over your car before reaching the intersection, same thing I said before. You want to tap your brakes several times before you even signal, just to let anybody know behind you that you're pulling over, okay? If you're planning to pull over beyond the intersection, it's very important that you make sure people behind you know that you're not making the right or the left turn, that you're pulling over to the curb. You don't want to confuse them. So, you want to make sure that you signal and start moving your car over after you pass the intersection. Because if you signal before, then the person behind you will think that you're making a turn, okay? So you always want to make your intentions clear to the other drivers around you. Now, before changing lanes, there are some questions you want to ask yourself, okay? Number one, will other vehicles ahead or behind be making the same moves that I intend? So, for instance, if I'm getting into the left lane, I'm changing lanes, and I'm going into the left lane, and I've signaled, checking traffic, and I'm about to pull into the left lane, suppose a car behind me is also moving into the left lane. You don't want to both be changing lanes at the same time because, of course, that creates the potential for danger. So you want to make sure that other people aren't doing the same thing you are. Number two, is anyone in the lane I wish to enter? Naturally, you want to make sure you're checking your blind spots. Nobody's in that lane. And number three, as I was saying before, if somebody's changing lanes the same time as you, and also if somebody's, in that lane, it's very possible they may be driving rapidly. And you want to be able to, and this is where it takes experience, you want to be able to assess their velocity well enough so that, they're not going to creep right up to you if they're coming really fast and create the potential for danger, all right? Some common mistakes when changing lanes, neglecting to use your turn signal. That's a very common one, unfortunately. We see that a lot for turns and lane changes. Maintaining your speed, but, not adjusting your speed properly. So getting into the new lane and, say, being too slow, okay? Especially if there's a slow-moving vehicle ahead. You probably want to pass that vehicle before you change lanes, okay? And, of course, in light of that, you don't want to be too close to the vehicle ahead of you when you finish your lane change. All right, let's talk about turning. Now, I always tell students in driver's ed that turning is the hardest thing for most students to learn. It's obviously extremely important because we're turning all the time. You're not driving straight all the time. Um, and it requires a lot of eye-hand coordination. In other words, you need to be able to balance how you control the steering wheel with your arms. You need to be able to manage the brake and the gas with your right foot. Your eyes need to be in the right direction. There's a lot involved in a turn, okay? So, some of the things that it involves: spatial judgment, speed control, and steering skill. I'm going to repeat, those three main things are most important in effecting safe turns: spatial judgment, speed control, and steering skill. So what do you want to be aware of before turning? Number one, you want to make sure you're aware of your speed. You want to proceed slowly into a turn. You don't want to exceed between 5 to 15 miles per hour as you're going into a turn. 5 to 15. Because if you're doing beyond that, you're running the risk of losing control. Okay, so you want to be very careful of that. Before you approach that turn, tapping your pedal, your brake pedal, to alert other drivers that you're slowing down and you're turning is, of course, very important. And then, after you've tapped it, you want to apply steady pressure, okay, on your brakes. So you're gradually slowing down, not necessarily stopping. Again, you want to be between 5 and 15 as you start that turn, okay? And as you're turning, as you're going into the turn, you want to maintain that slow speed. Then as you are adjusting your steering wheel to come back to recover and completing the turn, you want to accelerate. So as the recovery is happening, you accelerate. So you drive right into the turn at the end. You don't want to stop or slow down too much, okay? So as you're recovering, you're accelerating. You're not doing one and then the other, okay? A sharper turn requires that you go into it more slowly, because if you go into a sharp turn too fast, again, you run the risk of losing control. Searching ahead. We're always looking as far ahead as possible. I would say, as you go into a turn, right or left, identify a target that, you use to aim your eyes, okay? You're searching ahead in that spot, but you're not fixating. Remember, you always want to take in your surroundings. Your eyes should always be moving. You want to anticipate what's happening in your periphery, okay? But at the same time, you're maintaining your focus on your path of travel. And you adjust your focus and steering accordingly. The turning radius is important. So you don't want to turn too soon or too late, okay? Because, again, you can fail. You can lose control of the car. You create a dangerous situation. So, for instance, if you start a left turn too soon, you run the risk of crossing that line and heading towards oncoming traffic on that two-way street. So you don't want to start the left turn too soon. If you start a right turn too soon, you run the risk of hitting the curb with your back wheel on the turn, okay? So turning too soon, turning too late, you're going to end up with a wide turn, and if you're making that left turn and you're starting too late, you may be going towards the parked car lane. If you're making your right turn and you're turning too late, you may be going too far to the left on that turn and towards oncoming traffic or parked cars. So again, the timing of that is important. On a turn, you of course need to signal your intentions. Just like with lane changing, people shouldn't be guessing what you're doing. So the general rule is at least 100 feet before turning, about a half a block. And you can extend that a bit, 150 feet, maybe around 200 feet tops. Okay, but within that range, 100 to 150 feet. Don't signal too early, because that can create confusion. Somebody might think you're turning sooner than you really are. Okay, so you want to be aware of that. Now, as you're approaching the intersection to turn, you want your car in the appropriate lane. Sometimes there are designated lanes for right turns or left turns. And so, of course, those are the lanes you need to be in. If there are no designated lanes, then you move a little to the right or a little to the left. You get yourself as close to the right or the left as possible so you're in position to make the turn. Let's talk a little bit about a right turn. So prepare, first of all, on either turn, you want to prepare well in advance. As we said, you're signaling 100 to 150 feet away from the corner where you're turning, but it's probably about 500 feet that you're making a decision to turn, okay? So once you've made that decision, once you get to that 100, 150 foot range, that's when you signal. The right turn now, you're moving into the far right lane, okay? You're reducing your speed. You want to have, assuming there's no parked car on your right, you want to be 3 to 5 feet from the curb on your right. If there is a parked car, 3 to 5 feet away from the parked car on your right. But you do want to make sure you check that blind spot on the right. Because if you may not realize it, if you don't check it, that you may have a bicycle or a motorcycle creeping in on your right, and that could be the potential, could create the potential for disaster, okay? You're checking traffic ahead, to the right, to the left, and to the rear in all directions. You yield to anybody who's in the crosswalk, okay? When your front wheels are in line with the point where the curb begins to curve, that's when you start turning towards the right. Okay, so that's really your reference point. Okay, your front wheel is right at the curb where it starts turning, right at that corner. And that's when you start your turn. And you look your eyes through the path of the turn. Remember, general rule, what you look at is where your car's going to go. So you want your eyes following the path, okay? Turning the wheel, of course, clockwise into that right turn. And as you're just about to approach center, you're reversing your steering process. So you're cutting your wheel, of course, back to the left. You may need to cancel your signal if it's not sharp enough, the turn. Most turns, as you're cutting back to the left, the signal cuts off on its own, okay? And you adjust your speed as appropriate. You may need to speed up a little or slow down a little, okay? But you go right with the flow of traffic. You're not stopping. You're not going too slow, all right? So those are some basic things on the right turn. Now, again, I'm giving you, the textbook information. We could talk about it till we're blue in the face, but the more you practice, the better you get at it. And at this point, you're all well into the semester, so I assume you've been practicing these things. But, if you just kind of put what I'm saying together with the practice, and, you've got yourself the best resources. Let's talk about a left turn. So the left turn, if you are turning from a two-lane street where it's traffic going in opposite directions, you obviously want to yield the right of way to traffic coming towards you. So you get yourself out into the intersection and you wait for any oncoming traffic. Again, you make a decision, you prepare to make that left turn about 500 feet ahead, okay? And again, you signal about 100 to 150 feet ahead, all right? Once you've signaled and you're approaching that intersection, this time you're moving yourself into the far left lane, okay? There may be a designated lane for a left turn. If there isn't, you're moving as far left as you can. If it's a one-way street, you're moving within 3 to 5 feet of the parked car or the curb on your left side. Reducing your speed, just like we did with the right turn. Checking traffic ahead, to the left and the right, and behind, like we did with the right turn. Making sure there are no bicycles, motorcycles, pedestrians coming up on your left. Making sure the crosswalks are clear. Looking through your turn along the intended path of your turn. Again, like we did with the right turn. You want to begin your left turn when your wheels are in line with the center of the street. Okay? I always say if you're turning onto a two-lane street, your front wheels should be about even with that double yellow line. Okay? You want to be in the center of that intersection as you're waiting to make that turn. Keep your wheels straight. You want to keep your steering wheel straight if you're waiting for oncoming traffic. Because if you turn your wheel, but you're sitting in position with a turned wheel and you get hit from behind, your car's going to angle into that oncoming traffic, which obviously is very dangerous. Okay? And you turn the wheel smoothly, of course, counterclockwise. Follow the path, so you turn into the lane that corresponds to the lane you left. So, sometimes there's more than one lane. If you're turning into a street that has two lanes going in the same direction, you always want to turn in the nearest lane. So if you're turning left onto Highland Boulevard, right, there's two lanes going in that direction. You want to make sure your car finishes in the far left lane, all right? So always turn in the nearest lane. Focus ahead, obviously. Stay in your left lane. Complete your turn by reversing the steering wheel process. Obviously, now you're unwinding your steering wheel. You're going back clockwise. Cancel your signal if necessary, and adjust your speed as appropriate. Okay? And remember, as you're recovering, you're accelerating. All right? As you're recovering, you don't do one and then the other. You do them together. Okay? All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about reversing direction. First of all, backing up your car is always a last resort. If you're parallel parking, obviously you got to back it up. You may be backing into a driveway, okay? If you're doing a K-turn, a three-point turn on your road test, for instance, you got to back up. So you have to know how to reverse direction. But in life, in general, try to avoid backing up wherever possible, okay? Some things you need to consider then before you back up are the advantages and disadvantages and the risks involved. So you want to consider traffic density, speed, visibility, street layout, and local traffic laws. I'll repeat that. When you're reversing direction, when you're backing up, consider traffic density, speed, visibility, so if it's a rainy day, okay, or foggy, street layout, and of course, local traffic laws. You don't want to break any laws, okay? Oftentimes, the best choice, if you need to go in the reverse direction, is to go around the block. It may add some time to your trip, but if you can't back up safely, you can't make a U-turn or K-turn or whatever the case may be, then don't do it, okay? Let's talk about a two-point turn. Now, you're not going to have to do this on your road test, but a two-point turn basically means that you're backing your car up into a driveway or into a quiet street, okay? And then you're turning your car going in the other direction, all right? So basically that's what it is. And you don't want to do this, obviously, on a busy street. You want to be on a lightly traveled street. So what are the steps? Well, you're checking traffic ahead, to the right, to the left, behind, and you're checking your blind spot to the right, okay, because you're moving your car over to the right and you're going to be backing into that lane. Tap your brake pedal to alert drivers behind, okay, and turn on your right turn signal. So if you're moving over to the right, you want to signal right. Make sure there are no bicycles, motorcycles, or pedestrians in your intended path. And you want to, of course, yield to anybody in the crosswalk. Stop about 3 feet from the curb with the rear bumper just beyond the driveway. So you pass the driveway, okay, and your rear bumper is just past the driveway. So you're going past the driveway. You're keeping 3 to 5 feet away from the curb or the parked car, and you've passed, your back tire is a little past that driveway, okay? Keep your foot on the brake pedal. Shift to reverse. Again, check traffic in all directions. When the path is clear, look over your right shoulder again, because again, you're backing into that right lane. There might be a motorcycle or a bicycle. Back the vehicle slowly, and as you're backing slowly, you're turning your wheel quickly to the right. So now you're in reverse. Your car is backing into the right. So your wheel turns to the right. Be sure as you're backing up and before you back up that you check the front of your car, so your head goes back and forth. Because remember, the front of your car swings out into the left lane, okay, into the traffic lane, and that can be dangerous. As the rear of your vehicle enters the driveway, turn the steering wheel back to the left so it's centered, okay? And now you're even in your driveway. You're at that perpendicular point. Stop your car, keep your foot on the brake pedal, shift to drive, check for pedestrians and crossing traffic, and when traffic is safe, you pull out and you go in the other direction. So that's what you call a two-point turn. Okay? You won't be doing that on your road test, but you will be doing a three-point turn, which we'll talk about shortly. Now, suppose you want to do a two-point turnabout by turning left. So now what you're doing is you're going to be turning into a driveway on your left. You're going to be backing up, going in the other direction. Okay, some of the same basic concepts. You're checking traffic ahead, to the right, to the left, checking your blind spots, okay? You're selecting, obviously, the driveway or the alley on the left that you're going to turn into. You're tapping your brake pedal to alert drivers behind. You're signaling well in advance. Positioning your vehicle as if you were making a left turn. So you're moving over to the left, okay? Checking for bicycles, pedestrians in your path. You're yielding to anybody in a crosswalk. Turn your car left into the driveway. Stop when your car is straight and your back wheels are clear of the driveway. You've just cleared the driveway. You stop. Keep your foot on the brake. Shift your car to reverse. Turn on your right turn signal. Okay, so when you're backing up to the right, and this you want to remember on your K-turn as well, on your road test, when you're backing up and your car's going to back up to the right, you want to turn the signal to the right. So anybody who's coming in that lane can see that you're going to back out into that lane, okay? Check again for traffic in all directions. When the path is clear, look over your right shoulder and back your vehicle into the roadway. Keep looking behind you, okay? When the front wheels are straight, of course, keep looking behind you. You're steering your wheels sharply to the right, keeping the vehicle in the nearest lane of traffic as you're backing out. When your front wheels are straight, you stop your vehicle, cancel your turn signal, keep your foot on the brake, shift to drive, check for pedestrians and traffic, and then proceed, okay? U-turns. So U-turns, just like K-turns, you want to do them when it's a quiet area, okay? You want to do them usually mid-block in a quiet area. Choose an area with little traffic. You want to make sure there are no vehicles following, okay? So, you obviously, because you're crossing the traffic, you want to tap your brake lightly to let anybody behind you know that you're slowing down and pulling over as you turn your signal on to the right, okay? Stop as close to the right curb or edge of the pavement as possible. 3 feet, okay, is roughly good, 3 to 5 feet. Check for traffic in front and the rear. If it's clear, you signal left. Check a second time over your left shoulder because remember, in the interval, somebody could come. So the very last thing you want to do is check that blind spot over your left shoulder. Steer sharply to the left. Move slowly all the way around until you're facing the opposite direction. When the turn is nearly complete, you're cutting your wheel back and straightening. You're accelerating when your car is in position, and you're adjusting your speed, okay? Now, on your road test, you're going to have to do what's called a K-turn. It's also called a three-point turn. It's also called a broken U-turn. And the first steps that you do on the K-turn are basically a repeat of what I just said about the U-turn. Pulling over to the curb, pulling away. Except that now, when you're pulling away into traffic, instead of turning your wheel all the way to the left and keeping it there, or turning all the way sharply as you're moving, you want to angle your wheel so that you end up perpendicular to the curb on the other side. So I usually tell students, when you're, on the right and you're checking traffic while you're waiting, turn your wheel to the right and cut it back a little bit. Just keep it in that position. And then when you swing across, you're going to be automatically perpendicular to the curb. You could just do it as you're cutting across. So you're turning your wheel and you're adjusting it. But on the K turn, you want to make sure that you get all the way across the street. You don't want to do a U-turn here. You want to be perpendicular to the curb. Okay? And then, of course, you're checking traffic in both directions. And you're going to back up slowly, sharply to the right. Okay? Looking over your left shoulder. Okay? And your right shoulder. Make sure nobody's coming. You back in. You're checking your traffic. You get your car centered into that lane. You're facing now in the opposite direction. You shift your car to drive. And you adjust your speed and move forward. Okay? All right, so today we talked about basic maneuvers. We talked about turns, regular turns. We talked about two-point turns. We talked about U-turns. And we talked about three-point turns, which are also known as K-turns, also known as broken U-turns. And those last ones, you will have to demonstrate that you can do one on your road test. Okay? I'm holding off with parking. The first part of next week's lecture, we're going to talk about different types of parking, and we'll mainly focus on parallel parking because you need to do one of those on your road test. All right? And then we'll move on from there. Okay? One last thing before I close. This coming week, the Group A students will be driving. All are scheduled as normal. And again, continue to meet your instructor on the corner of Arbutus and Highland. And look out for this assignment later today. All right? Thank you, everybody, for your attention, and have a good Sunday.